Thank you very much for that introduction. I'd like to tell you guys a little story. This was the best phone that Google could make in 2009. It was the Verizon Droid. And back then, I was working with the Android team, trying to figure out, from a UX point of view, where did we want to go? What were the user needs? What were the new things, the disruptions that we wanted to do? And there's a big problem there, because the classic user experience approach is to, of course, talk to users. You should always start with users. But at the same time, you've got new radical technologies that's changing behaviors. And it's really quite complicated. And there's this famous quote I'm sure you've seen that came from Henry Ford. It said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would ask for faster horses. Now, there's some truth to this, but it's also a somewhat arrogant quote, because it kind of creates that tech bro culture of, oh, we'll just build it and it'll be awesome. But it does kind of talk about this pressure that we have about how do you innovate when you've got so many variables moving. So the question I wanted to ask was, what technologies will shape our phones in the next couple of years, and particularly 3 years' time? And I really wanted to kind of just understand the technologies. What were the building blocks that were coming? I didn't want to be technology first, but I wanted to be technology aware. Now keep in mind, this is 2009. And I wanted to talk about 2012. And we are way over here, 2019, kind of going, yeah, you were stupid. You know, so please be kind. I'm kind of telling you an old story. I'm exposing some of my dirty laundry. But keep in mind, it was 10 years ago, right? So Google was a much smaller company back then. I could actually go knock on Vint Cerf's door and say, hey, Vint, got 30 minutes? And he's like, sure, you know. And so where's the world going? I'd be writing all these notes down. Hal Varian. It was really awesome that I could just walk into these people's offices and ask them. So I took all these notes about what's going to happen in the next 3 years. And I was ready to go, and then something happened. There was a reorg. And the whole project I was working on got flushed, and I went on to something else, and all my notes went to that great cloud drive in the sky, and I forgot about it entirely. And so time passes. I ended up leaving Google. I went at Frog Design for a while. I was creative director at Frog Design, San Francisco, worked at a couple startups, but I came back to Google a couple years ago. And then just this spring, we were working with the Android team, saying, hey, what cool things can we do for Android in the next 3 years? I'm like, hey, I thought about this before. I've been working on this. Wait a second. So I went back and tried to figure out, like, could I find that file? And believe it or not, cloud drives actually work. I was actually able to find my file. And I was really curious. I was a little worried. It's like, how did they do? I'd forgotten everything I had written. And I was really worried when I opened it up, it was going to be like those 1950s cartoons about the future where they have mailmen, you know, delivering mail by rocket. And I was just like, please don't suck, because these are like my heroes, right? And sure enough, they were great. These are really well thought out, nuanced things. But remember, the question I asked was, what technologies will shape our products in 3 years? And from that point of view, it was a colossal failure. All the things they said were brilliant, and they were interesting, and they were technically very much correct. But they were talking about big ideas like computational photography, which we released this year in Night Sight. Talked about foldable displays, which are still just coming out right now, and other big topics. So there was a lot of really good stuff, but from the 3-year point of view, it didn't quite work. So I will never say Vint Cerf is wrong. That is a very career-limiting thing for someone to say. So I will never say that. But the question is really, why is it easier to see the big things and talk about those and miss the little ones? So I want to quote a very big inspiration with that great UX designer that I'm sure you all know, Thomas Edison, who said, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And to me, that's a classic insight to say, yes, you can have a great vision of where the world's going to go, but there's a lot of work that it takes to make it happen. And we've seen this throughout our history in technology, where you've got something like video phones, or you've got digital cameras that have shipped, and they've tried to build these things, and they just don't quite work. And lots of companies build and fall and fail and try. It takes multiple iterations. And of course, what ended up happening with both of these products is they were just sucked up by the mobile phone, which is that kind of the great universal widget that can do almost anything. And it just takes an awful lot of extra work. So the point I want to make is that innovation is compound. It's not enough to have one particularly cool idea. vision innovation needs execution innovation. And people often forget that it's a multi-stage process. And a lot of times people will see an innovative idea and immediately hate it because by itself it's kind of stupid, but all it needs is an additional execution innovation, and all of a sudden then it's really good. But I wanted to go further back. I wanted to go back not to 2009, but back to 1993. There was an AT&T ad, the You Will ad. I doubt it played here in Europe, but it had ads that said, "Have you sent a fax from the beach?" Or have you tucked your baby in from a phone booth? And these are all lovely visions that make an awful lot of sense. The issue with them is not that these weren't good visions, but they were based on the strength of their market at the time. They were really big about sending faxes, or they were really big about having phone booths. So they had lovely visions, but they were never the company that delivered either one of these things because it was based on the technology or on the infrastructure they had. So this is my second point about innovation. Innovation is ruthless. It's really easy to have rose-colored glasses about what your company can do. Your company's strengths may not matter. But let's go back even further, back to 1965 when the first original AI boom happened, people like John McCarthy and so forth. And back then, they were really excited about the raw technology, and they started thinking about things like doing chess and then doing translation. And what was interesting is at first they thought that chess was going to be really hard because it involves strategy and so forth, and translation was going to be easy. Just look up the word and put it in the dictionary and you're done. And it quickly, now I don't want to make fun of them because it's easy in hindsight to see this, but back then they actually came up with this term. It was called Moravec's paradox, about the idea that anything involving AI was significantly harder when it dealt with perception or culture. And so something like chess effectively could be reduced down to a fairly mathematical model and was relatively easy to solve. So the terms that they came up with from this time was called a hard-easy or an easy-hard problem. Hard-easy problems are problems that you think are hard, but turn out to be fairly easy to do. Easy-hard problems you think are really easy. No problem, computer can do it. And then it ends up being significantly harder because, darn it, people are involved and people are hard type of thing. So the problem I have with so much of technology today, this is a personal comment, is that it's almost like it's a giant Monte Carlo simulation. We just treat startups as kind of like a good luck. And you guys just try all this stuff and you fail and, oh, sorry. But with the ones that'll win, okay, fine, no problem. And we just treat this as just an experiment to just try. And I feel like there's a way we could kind of make this a little more efficient. There's a well-known phrase from Vietnam doctors, medics, that is a little bit dark, but it's just that the patient always stops bleeding. That's a little dark. But it's the idea that the equivalent in technology is that the company eventually figured it out. And that's what happens today with technology. We just keep trying these things and just expect that we'll eventually try, and that just feels like a bit of a waste. So this is my last point on innovation. Innovation is vague, and it's this well-known term, you don't know what you don't know, because so much is happening in this space. So these are the three rules that I kind of discovered this last spring as I was playing around. And I realize you're all kind of here saying, Scott, you've been here for 10 minutes, and your big message is innovation is hard. We knew that. Well, no, I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to actually be a little bit more aspirational and trying to push this a little bit more, because what we all know is that innovation is scary. And that we know that deep inside, and that's why we do this incremental work. If you're familiar with Clayton Christensen, The Innovator's Dilemma, it's always easy to do the incremental work. And anybody who tries something crazy to veer off the path and go do something, it usually fails, and so get hot, see, he deserved that. So the question then is, how do we actually use this classic UX design loop? This is every design thinking article you'll ever read has a loop like this, and I'm not disagreeing with it. This is the right, proper loop, and this is what things like Sprint talk about. The problem is that we get stuck. We always get stuck in here because we get so obsessed with trying to do things right and perfect that what ends up happening is we go through the loop one time. Okay, that's not a loop. That's a bent line, right? And so the trick is, to make this loop work, you have to loop it a few times. And so I actually ended up pushing the wrong button here. So the problem here is when we prototype, we have this mindset of prototyping to win. And we're trying to balance the needs of the users, who have existing uses right now, and this new technology that we want to then use to change the user's behavior. And these are two completely different variables. And it was what I started with the mobile phone thing with Android. How do we understand these trade-offs? And so what you do instead is you prototype to fail. It's a trick. It's a mental trick. I'm not trying to say anything terribly complicated here, but it's an important emotional switch that you make that makes all the difference. Because what ends up happening is that if you understand that innovation is vague, you make a bad prototype as a quick probe. It's just something that's the best that you can do right now. And then by building that, you can then question your assumptions. And more importantly, as you play with it, you try to figure out what is that execution innovation that your vision innovation needs. That's what the loop is all about. The trick is to do it as fast as you possibly can. So I really like Thomas Edison. I'll quote him again. Just because something doesn't do what you planned doesn't mean it's useless. And that's the fundamental point here. You've got to do something stupid and really do it fast to make a difference. And that's the issue here. By doing prototyping to fail, you speed up that loop. I'm not ignoring users. I'm not trying to just do something because it's easy. I'm trying to make that loop go around. So the whole point here is to give you an example. And so I'm going to give you a positive example and a negative example because I wanted this to be somewhat honest. So be nice. So about 2 years ago, I started working on the digital well-being product at Google. We announced numerous things to help you use your phone in a more balanced way. We've had Do Not Disturb, which is this little button that you press that turns off all notifications. We've had it for a long time. We knew that people that used it well really valued it. It was a very powerful tool. But in studying users, we found there were two big problems. First, people would turn it on, and they'd forget it was on, and they'd go through the rest of their day, and they would miss an important call or text, and they'd be really upset. So they would say, I'm never going to turn it on again. The other one is this idea of FOMO, fear of missing out, and they would worry that something really important would happen. And so there was an issue there as well. So we thought, okay, fine. We now understand what the users are doing, what's the technology. So we decided to build this bad app. We called it the Calm app. And it was an app that was trying to tackle both of these issues. The first thing it did is that when you launched the app, it automatically put you into Do Not Disturb mode. The idea was to make the mode really visible. And that way you'd turn it on, you'd have your meeting, and then when you used your phone to check your mail, you'd be like, oh yeah, right. And then you'd quit the app and it would turn it off again. It was a really lightweight thing. So that was our, now again, quick, fast, and we knew we weren't going to ship this. But by giving it to people and then talking to them and experiencing it, we were able to get them to respond to the problem. So using this structure, we were able to say, okay, the problem was that people just didn't use it. And we asked them why. They're like, it's still too much trouble. It's easier than the other thing, but when I'm actually having a coffee with someone, I'm not going to take my phone out of my purse and then start fiddling around with the application. It's rude. I'm not going to do that. The next one is that the ruthless part was we were, of course, falling that trap of, hey, it's an app. There's an app for everything. Well, of course, apps were not the answer. We had to stop getting that assumption. And the real issue was how do we turn it on from sleep? We knew that people could pull out their phone, but we wanted to do as little as possible. And that's where we got the aha moment. And so what we shipped last year was something called the shush gesture. And this is different from other versions because the phone is completely asleep. If you take your phone out, it's using what's called the IMU, the measurement unit, the inertial measurement unit, that basically is measuring how quickly the machine is moving, and then effectively, if you turn it upside down, it will then send an event to the phone, and it'll put it into Do Not Disturb mode. In addition, it gives you a little haptic so that you know that it happened. And this has gone over very well. It's worked out very, very well, and we would have never gotten there if we hadn't done that bad prototype. Now, this was a lot more work than the 1 week thing we did, but the 1 week thing got us started. As a bonus, and this is sometimes just good things happen, we discovered that we created a social gesture. So now what happens is that you take your phone out and you set it down on the table as you're talking to someone, and we have now a social gesture that shows the person that you're talking to they're more important than your phone. I got lucky on that one, but it was really fun to see that people responded really well to that as well. Now, here's the bad one, the one that didn't work. So we knew that over 50% of all of your notifications in your phone come from your friends and messages. And we didn't want to stop them, we just wanted to slow them down. We wanted there to be like a little bump in the middle. And so the idea was that if someone texted you a message, it would reply with kind of a, hey, this is Scott's phone. Scott's busy at the moment, and texts are silenced. Text urgent to reach Scott. the idea is to break through, right? If you really were bleeding in the ditch, and you really need to get a hold of them, but that never happens, but you need to have that ability to do that. So the idea was we did this, and we discovered things right away. This was a really bad idea. First of all, what happens is that you end up saying, like, hey, and then in 300 milliseconds, you get this wall of text back. Like, whoa, a human did not type that type of feeling. Like, so there's already this kind of, who am I talking to feeling. On top of all that, it's a very hard thing to explain. Scott's busy. Scott doesn't care. Scott doesn't want to talk to me. He's damn straight, urgent, urgent, urgent. And we completely did the wrong thing here. So with this experience about this misunderstanding, we realized we had to stop. This is a very complicated problem. It really is effectively about a social contract. You can't turn this on without telling your friends and having 140 characters kind of go, this is exactly what's happening and you'll be fine. This is something that needs work and coordination and support. And so we're playing around with the idea that you do this with your friends. So the issue is that we learned then that we have to do this more and more and more. So we've gotten fun little things that we're doing with lock screens and other kind of app launchers, and we do this lots and lots of time. I only have time now to tell you this one particular app, but it both produced a particularly powerful thing that we shipped and a negative thing that we stopped shipping and understood that. So again, I don't want to oversell what I'm saying here. I'm not trying to reinvent design thinking, but I want us to go fast. We forget that speed is of the issue, and the best way to go fast is just to make a lot of mistakes and not be worried about it. Now, to be fair, it's a little hard sometimes when I go to my manager and go, well, we just did this prototype, and it really screwed up. That is a little bit hard, but at the same time, you always learn something from that. And if you keep it going quickly enough, it actually works out really well. So I want to close again with my spiritual mentor here. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And that is the fastest, best way to work. So thank you very much, and I hope to take some of your questions.
So what are your thoughts on process and methods boom in design? Second one. The second one there. We'll do the first one after. I went for the short one. Oh, it's gone to the top. There you go. Pick the right one. They're all great.
That's a hard question because there's lots of different processes and there's lots of different methods.
Yeah.
So I don't want to dodge the question because that would be cheating. I think that anything that makes you think and try and to give you some confidence to get it going is great. But I'm reminded of that famous quote from the other great UX designer, Bruce Lee, who said, when I just got started, a punch was just a punch. And then I just took it apart and I analyzed it, and I spent years deconstructing and weight transfer, and at the end, I just realized a punch was just a punch. And I don't mind us having process and methods to be reflective and being thoughtful, but it's still just being empathetic to the user and talking to them and understanding and ideating and going through that loop. So I don't want to overbake it sometimes.
Yeah. Next one down. What's your take on how to test ideas, build prototypes for future scenarios? I take it for scenarios that we're not ready to handle quite yet. Is that what they mean?
I can take a stab at that one. We try to build our prototypes as fast as possible. So people have talked about paper prototypes. I mean, really, you want to build something in as quickly as possible. We had a crazy idea about how to do haptic feedback on the phone, and we could have built a prototype, and instead I put 2 drops of glue on the screen, let it dry, and then we ran the thing, and just to see what would happen if they felt the glue dots. We had a huge response. It worked really, really well. So they're like, okay, so then we went back and we then spent the time. So I'm a big believer in this really low fidelity work as quickly as you can. You'd be surprised how much you can learn from really bad prototypes.
Yeah. Did you say that you were one of the guys who reviewed Jake, who...
Oh, yeah, I reviewed the Sprint book with Jake.
Sprint book, yeah.
I love that book.
Pretty cool book. So what do you consider as your best fail? That's a good question.
Well, I kind of brought it to the table with that. I really like the idea of slowing down communication. You know, the slow food movement for the digital age. How do we have messages just take their time arriving. You know, wouldn't that be nice because if people don't remember, but in the 1990s, SMSs took 15 minutes to arrive. We survived. Now, of course, I'm sounding like an old man, but you know, the point is that can we slow down instant technology? So I think our heart was in the right place, but oh, did it fail? Right? It was a pretty spectacular failure. So. Yeah.
You're really efficient at answering questions, so let's go for one more. Okay. We're really inflating this. How can we encourage failures in a good way? Or you can take the next if you prefer.
No,
You're not
it's got 4 votes. Come on,
there you go.
Listen to the will of the people.
Absolutely.
To me, the best thing about encouraging failures is to do them quickly so that they don't feel like you're betting the farm on them. If in a 3-month period of time you produce like 7 of these things, and they fail, but a couple of them hit, you'll be fine. It's if you put all your eggs in one basket and you fail, that's why everybody doesn't want to fail, because they only have one thing. So of course you can't fail. So that's my point. Just do a lot.
Scott Jenson, thank you very much for your wisdom.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Scott Jenson, ladies and gentlemen.